Hey,
Hi, it's so
how's
nice
it
to meet
going?
you. I'm good. How are you?
Good. It's so good to see you.
Okay, so I'm Minal, in case you didn't know how to pronounce my name.
Okay, awesome. I'm
And
Bayan.
yeah. Okay, so your parents were like first like immigrants from Egypt, I'm guessing.
Yeah, both my parents were immigrants from Egypt, and then my siblings and I are all like first generation Americans.
Okay. If you had to describe yourself in one sentence, what would it be?
Oh man. In one word or one sentence?
One sentence.
Okay, one sentence.
It's okay, take your time.
This is harder than I expected. Let's see. In one sentence, I would say
It doesn't have to be like grammatically correct.
um I'm someone who is willing to go the extra mile to um, help others out and achieve the milestones that I want to work towards.
Okay, perfect. If you see me like not looking at the screen, I'm just typing some notes down.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah. All right. Tell me about your childhood and your experience as a woman in your hometown.
Okay, definitely. So I grew up in a really small town in Connecticut that was not diverse at all. So I think my experience as a woman in that town was also informed as being a minority woman and a woman of color as well. I think that growing up, my Egyptian and Muslim identities were two very important and central things to me. And that really informed my experiences because as a woman of color in spaces in my hometown, whether that was in school, especially in school, it meant that a lot of the times that I had to educate people on my experiences and my background and things like that. And so I think that that was definitely a big part of growing up, getting used to what it meant to have people be so unfamiliar, and you kind of having to take on the role of educating them on that. I think especially being a woman and woman of color, a lot of times your like traits or your leadership or things like that can be more easily overlooked. And so I think that having those systems in place um, meant that a lot of the times I had to kind of climb over a lot of additional barriers to get to the points that I wanted to reach. But I think I'm grateful for the work that I put in and grateful for the experiences that I had in the sense that they kind of built me into who I am now. But I would definitely say that being a woman and especially a woman of color in my hometown was not a easy experience.
Yeah, I completely understand that. Like, even going to like a private school in Kentucky, it's just
Yeah.
like half the time, like, I mean, I bet for you, especially growing up, you were probably like the first like Muslim anyone had ever met or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you're just like representing your entire race, you know?
Yeah. No, I think it's definitely a very like interesting experience when the people around you haven't been like exposed to someone like you and it's kind of on you to like shape their perspective and make sure that
Yeah,
it's like a
exactly.
positive one from the start. I think it's like a big
Hmm.
responsibility to take on, definitely.
Yeah, and if it's a bad experience, they're like suddenly like, oh, all people who are like this are like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, definitely.
Can you think of a time that you felt particularly aware of your gender and how it led you to be treated?
Mm, let's see. I think this is something that has always stood out to me that isn't as specific, but it stands out as an idea because it's something that's like, I think, very repeated.
Mhm.
Is in like especially growing up and particularly I think more in like middle and high school, as a woman in like meetings who is trying to get involved in extracurriculars, I think it's much more easy for your voice to like be spoken over, and for your like ideas and input to be less valued. I think that was definitely something that was much more of like a recurring theme that stood out to me. And so I think that like when I got to college, it was really important for me that I didn't let being a woman mean that like my voice was any less heard or any less valued in the rooms that I entered. And I think that like now in the role that I'm in, I also make sure that like the voices of other women are especially brought to the table and amplified and made like that they feel especially comfortable and ready to take on those experiences, because I think that like even though it's not like one specific instance that I'm citing, it's much more just like a very general, like recurring theme that I felt like I've consistently experienced. And that had a big impact on like how I approached a lot of my experiences in college after going through that.
Yeah, I completely feel that, especially now because like for some reason, like where I go to school, especially in my grade, pretty much
Yeah.
every like extracurricular, like the extra mile that you go, it's been like all women for me. Like I don't know
Yeah.
any boy who like actually tries in my school. So
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever felt like that until now because I'm the only girl in my comp sci class this year. So I
Oh,
have
oh
like
my gosh.
all these boys around me trying to teach me how to code or tell me I'm doing
Yeah.
something wrong. And I'm like, no, I'm not.
Yeah, I definitely feel that. I think that's another common one now that you say it too. I think that in certain STEM classes, I've definitely experienced that, whether it was like AP classes in high school or like
Yeah.
advanced STEM classes that I'm taking at Yale now. I think that's a very common experience where like men in the room will like just assume that you have less knowledge or less experience associated with something. And I think
Yeah.
like learning to overcome that and like be firm in that like you have your knowledge and your experience is like a big thing to kind of establish.
Yeah, of course. So right now, what are you studying at Yale?
So I'm a pre-med student, and I'm double majoring in molecular biology and global affairs, and I'm minoring in global health studies.
Okay, so would you can like consider that to align with your passions?
Yeah, definitely. I think that a lot of times when I first say what I'm studying, people are a bit like taken back by it because it seems like a lot of different interests at once. But I
Yeah.
think that the goal when I picked my majors and my minor was that all of my interests would be able to like tie into one another. And so I'm like I mentioned, I'm pre-med and I'm interested in medicine and healthcare, but I'm also really interested in how international development and policy work can tie into healthcare and be used to actually better healthcare experiences, particularly like in the Middle East and Africa, especially. And so I think that like being able to study both at the same time, not only my interest in STEM and medicine, but also my interest in global affairs and global health has been really valuable to kind of make sure that I hold on to both interests and see how they can like inform one another and actually really connect really beautifully, I think.
That's amazing. I think that's especially really important because like so many people now are finally starting to see that there's like different paths you can go besides just being a doctor or like
Yeah.
just being a lawmaker and like trying all those passions together at the same time.
Yeah, definitely. And I feel like it's been a good experience to kind of like forge my own path and direction in how I wanted to approach being pre-med. I think that a lot of times it's like easy for there to be a clear-cut path that that people will want to follow. But I think that I've tried to really like hone in on the experiences and like interests that I have and use that to like guide and inform what I choose to do.
Mhm. A double major and a minor. Wow. That must be fun.
Yeah, it's an interesting time.
Are you allowed to like declare two majors and a minor, or is it technically only two majors?
No, I can declare. So basically at Yale, our minors are like called certificates instead. And so you have to like apply into the certificate programs. And so like I've declared my majors and then I'm also like was accepted into the certificate program for global health studies. So then that also is like a separate thing that I pursue as well.
Oh, okay. Because I know he was double majoring in comp sci and econ, and she
Yeah.
technically has like enough credits to minor in philosophy, but she can't like officially declare that because they only let you like do like a combination of two.
Oh, interesting. Okay, that's really
Yeah.
interesting. I know that I think they don't put our certificates on our diplomas, I think, is the,
Hmm.
like, stipulation, but it's still, like, yeah, I don't know, it's weird.
Yeah. What would you consider your proudest accomplishment?
My proudest accomplishment? Um, I feel like the most immediate answer would probably be, um, like, being elected the first Muslim and first Arab president of Yale. I'm trying to think if
Yeah.
there's I feel like that's the one. Um, I think that it's, like, obviously very recent and also just, like, the scale and magnitude of it and the impact that, most importantly, it's been able to have on other people has probably been, like, one of the most rewarding parts about it.
Yeah, that's amazing. I was, like, assuming you would say something like that. How has that experience been for you?
I think it's been a really incredible, but also really, um, I would say, like, um, a lot of work has gone into it. It's really enjoyable, but also really demanding at the same time. I think that,
Mhm.
like, being in this role, there's so much that you can do, and there's so much that you kind of preside over that you want to do it all. And I think that I'm definitely someone who, like, once
Yeah.
that there is that opportunity, I want to make sure that I do everything I can. But I think that, like, at the same time, it is really rewarding to see that the impact that I can have in the role, and also by being, like, the first Muslim and first Arab in the position, to also, like, see the impact that it can have on other women of color, to hope that, like, more women of color can take on roles like this as well.
Yeah, of course. I bet you're, like, already opening up so many paths just by existing. That's amazing.
Thank you.
Um, how would you say you empower people in your life and or communities?
Mm. I think that the biggest thing I try to do is, like, really, really be there for people as a resource. I think that more often than not, there's a gap in, like, information and knowledge and resources. And I think
Yeah.
that if I can be the person to fill that gap for people, especially for other women and especially for other women of color, I think that's, like, one of the most valuable ways that I see that I can empower them, by giving them the tools, the resources, and the information, that that can put them on the
Mhm.
path of pursuing what they hope to. I think that, like, especially at a place like Yale, having someone who can, like, advise you, someone who has, like, this past knowledge and experience, is really valuable and really important in being able to, like, navigate going to school here. And so I think that, like, I have definitely honed in on trying to be that person for a lot of other women at Yale, to make sure that they have someone that they can turn to during their time here.
Yeah, I mean, especially I feel like as people of color, like when your parents haven't been building like generations of connections, you kind of have to
Yeah.
start it all on your own. So it's like such a different position.
Yeah, I definitely agree.
Who or what taught you the importance of empowerment and how did it affect your life?
It's a good question. Um, I feel like I have a few different answers to this. Um, but I think the most obvious one, and probably the most, like, basic one as well, would be my parents, and particularly my mom. I think my mom is someone who sacrificed a lot for each and every one of my siblings and I, and in the process of that, she was always, like, working to make sure that we could um, pursue our, like, interests and the experiences that we wanted to. And so I think that, like, she taught me a lot of that, and what it looks like to be willing to go the extra mile for other people. She taught me what it looks like to, like, genuinely, like, hope for the best and want the best for other people, and to be willing to, like, work alongside them to have them achieve those things. And I think that, like, her instilling those things in my siblings and I very early on was definitely a guiding force in, like, the experiences and interests that I ultimately had.
Aw. Do you have any advice for girls who are also trying to empower themselves?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is to, like, to go for it. As simple as it sounds, go for it. Do not let whatever factors it may be, like the fact that you're a woman, the fact that you're a minority, the fact that other people will like perceive you differently. Do not ever let other people be the reason that you don't try something. Not even the reason that you don't do it, but the reason that you don't try it in the first place. I think that it's really, understandably so, really easy for us to get overwhelmed by like the stereotypes and the preconceived notions and assumptions that people will have about us as women. But I think that even so, it's important for us to try to move forward as best as we can, to try as many experiences as we can, and to do what we can to pave the way forward. Because even though we do have a more difficult path ahead, I think the more of us who are willing to kind of go forward and to try despite the obstacles that are in front of us, the easier that it can become for the women after us and the women after her and the women after her. And so I think that that's like one of the most critical things, is like not letting other people be the reason that you don't try something, and to always go for it, no matter the odds, no matter the obstacles, at least just trying it in the beginning.
How can the international community help you and your community in a legitimate way? Like, is there anything you want us to share with our global girlhood community in particular?
Share in terms of like information or like resources, or what would.
Anything like that, like anything you want us to get out there for more people to know about or learn about.
Oh, interesting. I think a big one that stands out to me, especially when we're talking about like spaces that center women and their experiences, is the importance of like including Muslim women. I think that like a lot of times, in spaces that like include women, it's easy for Muslim women to like either be forgotten or to still have a lot of added stereotypes like placed on them, especially for hijabi women. And so I think that like
Hmm.
the overall message would be that in these like spaces and conversations that we have, I think it's incredibly important that we like look around and think about what women haven't historically been included, and haven't had their voices and their perspectives included as much. And so, like obviously for me, the ones that come to mind are Muslim women, but I think that there's also so many other like groups of minority women as well, and just really taking the time to critically think about like who has and hasn't been included and who needs to be brought to the table, and what like tangible steps can be made to make sure that their voices are the ones being represented, to speak on their behalf, is really important.
That's a great answer, and I definitely agree.
Yeah.
So much for agreeing to do this. I know you have such a busy schedule.
Yeah, no worries. I appreciate you thinking of me.
Yeah, of course. Have a nice day. I mean,
Bye.
night.